Hi, I'm Realtor Sarah Morrow with South State Peak Realty. On today's Proper Tea Time, we're discussing acquiring and owning property with retirement accounts. This is a lesser-known strategy that today's guests and I are both grateful to have learned and executed on in the last few years. Her name is Esther, and I've been looking forward to having her in to discuss IRAs with me all month. I look up to her greatly, and I feel lucky to be following in the footsteps of somebody who's tackling their retirement goals the way that she is. Esther is a self-proclaimed financial nincompoop gone investor, and in just 3 years' time, she's become successful not just in real estate, but in tax saving strategies and interest reduction, and she's proficient in creatively generating multiple streams of income without a business or a life partner. A mom of 3 young adults with a corporate job, she's also become a small business owner, and she shares her message with others as the leader of a group called Empty Nester, Gone Investor, Like Esther, which I find genius. She's going to share with us today about her passion for high-quality educational foundations, her resulting involvement, therefore, with a group called Renatus, and she'll tell us about how self-directing her IRA has helped her gain peace of mind and has helped her more than double her retirement returns. Esther, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And Sarah, thank you for such an amazing introduction. That was awesome. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Why don't we jump right in? Could you tell us, I don't know, just the abridged version of a little bit about your background, your story, and how you got involved in real estate investing?
Well, thank you for asking. And I grew up like most people in a home that you're told, go to school, get good grades, go to college, and get that great job. I signed up for that plan, so much so that I earned that coveted 6-figure income. And my husband was making a 6-figure income. We have life all figured out. We had the house with the white picket fence, the 2.5 kids, the minivan. It was just, life couldn't get any better. Then 5 years ago, I found myself single after 33 years of marriage.
Wow.
Had 2 mortgages. Okay, I don't have 2.5 kids. I have 3. But 2 of them were still in college. Thank goodness for in-state tuition. I lost more than half of my nest egg or my 401k plans, my retirement accounts, and I was in my 50s. As the saying goes, Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah, got it. So you've mentioned retirement, and it is today's focus. So how did you deal with this idea of like, okay, I'm already 53 and I was planning to retire? Can you talk about that 7-ish, 10-ish, 20 years that you were planning on working and what your plan A, your plan B, your plan C became? How did you manage?
Well, so I didn't have a plan actually, and I considered myself well educated from the academic standpoint, but as far as finances, I had no clue. So in my mind, I'm thinking, all right, I could just work until I'm 92 and just keep plugging away, but I knew that was not going to be the solution. So I quickly had to readjust because I was such a financial nincompoop. This is the truth of it. So my former husband was a VP at a large bank, so anything finance, that was up to him. So when he moved out, I didn't know the username and password to my checking account, my life savings accounts, nothing. So I thought, how do I go from here to making my retirement work? And so I'm like, okay, we'll just keep doing what we're doing. And that was not going to work. So I had to quickly change and educate myself.
So is there like a formula? How did you know? I mean, you knew financially you were not going to be okay, but like, how could those of us who maybe aren't yet 53 take the blinders off of even our situation? Is there like a formula, or is there some inflation percentage, or like math? How do you even do that math?
So I'm going to be completely honest. I'm terrible at math, and so I didn't do the numbers or crunch the numbers per se, but I just knew in my mind I didn't have enough. But interestingly, I came across this chart. And this chart is basically saying if you retire at age 65 and you live for 20 years and say you need a monthly income of $10,000, well, that means you will have had to save $3.4 million in order to start drawing out $10,000 a month. I thought, okay, I'm nowhere close. And I thought, well, by the time I'm in retirement, I only need $3,000. Even at $3,000 a month, you need $1.04 million saved. So when I saw this chart, I thought, this is an eye-opener for me, and I can't even imagine what it'd be like for the average American.
Wow. So you mean to retire at 65 and live to about 85 and to have really anywhere between 3 and 10 grand, you've got to have $1 million plus socked away, not to be touched outside of your usual
Absolutely.
income.
And hope that the market doesn't tank and that inflation doesn't go crazy. So you're needing to stock that up in kind of a nest egg. And I thought, okay, there's got to be a better solution. And that better solution is buy chickens, and they'll kick off the eggs, right? So that's what I did.
So instead of nest eggs, and instead of like new little savings accounts that you were going to have to work to fill, you came up with the idea of having chickens instead of eggs, and you came up with having more, I assume, streams of cash flow. What did you do? Like you had to accelerate your earnings inside of the next decade, and you're doing that now, I know, but like, can you share what actions did you start taking?
So the first action I took was I started getting myself educated in not just real estate investing, but in financial literacy principles. It's how do you design a life by not just default, but actually design it. So I started educating myself in how do you pay less in taxes while you're still working a job? How do you pay less interest to the bank in the way of mortgage payments or car payments, student loans, etc. So it was that real estate and financial literacy education that was the most important to me.
So today's topic is really retirement in all facets. And one thing that you and I share in common is that we've both acquired and owned property with the help of a Roth IRA. In other words, you and I don't own the property, our retirement funds own the property. And that is in my experience, lesser known, sort of an advanced strategy that I'd like to share with more people through this show and other means. Can you talk a little bit about I know you had a corporate job yourself, as did your husband, and there was a traditional IRA, I assume, in place with the help of your company that both you and they were contributing to. But how did you get from that to owning property, or your Roth IRA owning property and cash flowing?
It was kind of a journey that I had to go through to first understand what is an IRA. I didn't even know what an IRA was. So I knew that I had an old employer, 401k, just sitting at Fidelity. And when I met with my financial planner, I guess it was, he was just like, you're going to be fine. Just keep putting money away. And if the markets turn a little bit, then you're in it for the long haul. And I thought, that's not comforting because I only have about 10, 15 years to go. So when I found that you can take that old 401k from an old employer and self-direct it, I thought, perfect. But then when I asked Fidelity, well, can I buy properties? They told me no. And I thought, okay, so then what do I do? So I found a company, it's Directed IRA, is who have my funds. And then I have what's called checkbook control. So I take the funds and they put it into their account initially, and then they give me a check, and then I open up a business checking account so that when I have to pay for properties, pay for maintenance, pay for all these things, I don't keep having to call my custodian. Now, it's a multifaceted step. It's not like you can just go, oh, I'm going to buy properties and I'm going to do it in my self-directed IRA. There's a lot of steps you have to put into place first, and that's what I had to learn, because there's a lot of do's and don'ts and who can you transact with and not transact with. So I had to figure that part out first before I even went and looked for properties.
Sure. Yeah, I can relate. So in other words, so Directed IRA serves as a custodian, and they actually are the purchasers of the properties to keep you at an arm's length, right? You are only allowed to transact with your own 401k so much, or your own retirement plan, I should say, and then they actually technically they're doing kind of the management in a way. Like you hire a property manager, but they're the ones writing checks and they're the ones paying taxes.
Actually, no, they aren't, and that's where I made that reference to a checkbook control account. So I have an LLC set up, then I opened up a bank account. It's a business checking account. And so all of the expenses and even purchase of the property, I do it by my checkbook.
I see.
Because if I had directed to do that, then there'd be multiple fees along the way every time they write a check.
So you have an IRA LLC in place.
Correct.
Got it. I do not have that. So I guess I must be paying some fees that you are dodging. That's really interesting. So you have in this time frame since you turned 53 and you discovered all this, you still have a traditional IRA, and that I assume is still with your current employer?
Yes. So I still do have my corporate job, and so it's a 401k. And so the rules with a current employer 401k are different. You can only borrow, and you can't necessarily use the money to
self-direct.
Yep.
Got it. But you opened up this separate self-directed IRA, so you've got two. This other one that owns property is it's a custodian, it's a directed IRA, it's a Roth, and that's where you purchase properties from. Good for you. Wow. So you have two different, we'll call them nest eggs, or actually these are more like chickens.
Absolutely. They are chickens, and they're spewing out eggs in the form of cash flow each month.
Okay, cool. So these are rentals. The two properties that you own with your Roth are rentals, and they cash flow.
Actually, so the two properties that I own them in Memphis, Tennessee. And interestingly enough, I purchased them sight unseen. I just had to trust the pictures and videos that were sent to me. So those are in Tennessee, and that's in my traditional IRA. Then my Roth IRA, I actually have a short-term rental in Salt Lake City. And because it's a Roth self-directed IRA, I don't manage it myself because that would be a prohibitive transaction.
Gotcha.
So I have a property manager who does all of the listing and does the interacting with the custodian, or the customers. So, and the interesting story about this is my children really had no interest in doing this real estate investing with me, but my son-in-law one day says, "Mom, I heard you're doing something with a Roth IRA and a short-term rental." I said, "I am." And he says, "Mom, I have a Roth IRA. Can I do that too?" So the property we have, it's called the lease arbitrage. We don't even own the property. It's a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom upstairs and a 1-bedroom, 1-bath downstairs. So my Roth IRA owns the top, and my son-in-law owns the bottom, or his IRA owns the bottom.
Wow.
And because we are a prohibited transaction, it's our IRAs that are doing this separately.
Sure. So families technically have different rules. They're prohibited from transacting together.
Absolutely.
But two different Roths who have that layer of protection.
Absolutely. And so with the rules with the IRA, or self-directing an IRA, is it's got to be linear. You can't transact linearly like your children or your parents, but it can be brothers, or it could be people on the side.
Aunts, uncles, in-laws.
Exactly.
Wow. I thought I was pretty savvy with my one rental in my Roth IRA, but you have those are some advanced levels up. So I admire what you've done.
Oh, thank you.
Can you share just a little bit more about it sounds like short-term rentals, self-directing your IRA, long-term rentals, leasing, not owning, are some of the strategies you've learned. You also mentioned that you've paid less in interest and you've saved on taxes. I don't want to say is that all, but are these are all strategies you've learned in a short period of time. Am I missing anything, and would you like to elaborate more on what it took to get educated and how long it's taken you to do all this financially?
When I first got involved with this community of real estate investors that I'm with, it took me 9 months of just watching my classes. And it was classes like tax and legal. It was classes like self-directing IRAs, credit. So for me, I had to start with the basics because I didn't know the basics. So it took me 9 months from the time I started watching my classes to actually own it, or my IRA owning my first property. So for me, 9 months, I felt like, oh, it's a long time. But then when I think back, well, 9 months isn't very long, because if you think about the traditional college route, it's 4 years before you can even go out and find a job. But so that's where I started. And so along the way, I'm learning so much more, like multiple streams of income, and you mentioned that. So the interesting thing was, I had always wanted this truck. And because I still have my corporate job, and the corporate job comes with a fleet vehicle, I really don't need a truck. But I'm like, I've always wanted one, but it'll just sit in my driveway. So how do I make this an asset versus a liability? So I put it on Turo, which is actually kind of Airbnb for cars. So during the winter months, most people come into town and they want to go from the airport to the ski resorts, but they have their skis with them. So they rent my truck. So I've been cash flowing like $1,300 a month, which means after I pay for the car payments, insurance, tax, and everything else, it cash flowed $1,300. And I thought, wow, and I got the truck that I've always wanted. So I'm just learning multiple streams of income that I would never have even thought about.
I'm so impressed with you. That is incredible. So you've got long-term rental, short-term rental, reduced taxes, reduced interest. You've got a dream truck that cash flows for you. You've got a property manager doing a lot of your income earning for you. You've got your family involved. As a fellow divorcee who hopes to retire someday with some money, I really admire you. Could you share how you got involved, or where these classes are? You mentioned classes and that you were able to watch.
Yes, absolutely. So the beauty of the classes that I have purchased is that they're all online, available 24/7. As adults with full active schedules, who has time to sit in a class for 8 hours or for 3 days trying to learn all these concepts? So it's all online on a platform that's accessible at midnight in my bunny slippers, or 5 in the morning with my cup of coffee, or in my car as I'm driving around still working my corporate job. So that's what's helped me get kind of accelerated, because I wouldn't have had the time to just take time off and sit in a class. So that's how I got educated, is on my own time when I needed it.
So it's mostly online, it's videos. And what's the company called?
So the company is called Roth, and they are based in Utah. So their studios are in Utah, and the thing that I love about this company is that when they record or re-record a class, you have the opportunity to go and participate as an audience member. And so I've gone a couple of times, and it's amazing the access you get to these professionals who've been doing this, whatever strategy is, for decades, and you can actually pick their brain and ask questions without having to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for their time.
And it sounds like you've really taken the time to apply it practically almost immediately to your life, start earning money, not just take the classes and write the notes and keep them in a drawer somewhere.
So interesting you asked that. So when I was in college, so I went to pharmacy school, my motto was, C's get degrees too. And so if I didn't have to learn something, I'm like, I don't want to learn that. With these classes, I want to learn. I want to take notes, and not just take notes for the sake of taking notes, but take notes to take action, which is so different from when I was in academic school. So, because this is more of financial literacy for me, and so I felt like, okay, I need to really embrace this and put it into action.
So directed IRA, excuse me, is a custodian who will allow you to actually self-direct your retirement money in a way that isn't in the stock market. They help you keep it in a certain type of account that you then purchase property with. Is that correct?
It is. So the beauty of the custodian that I selected, directed IRA, is their parent company is KKOS, and so they actually are my attorneys, and so that's who helped me structure my LLC correctly, and then they're the ones that were able to put the paperwork together for me to use the funds in a checkbook-controlled IRA situation, because without that, I would have probably broken a lot of rules and maybe even have had to forfeit the tax benefits of having an IRA.
Gotcha. So they're an accountancy, they're a legal firm, and they're a custodian that helps you with your retirement account so that you don't get yourself in prohibited transaction trouble.
Yep.
Well, good for you. I really admire all the steps you've taken. Renatus, directed IRA. She works for neither, but she is living proof of a huge success story. I look up to you. I admire you. Girl power.
Oh.
That's the proper T.
Thank you.
Thank you.